Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Tonight, we're talking about the 7 top admissions trends from a former University of Virginia admissions evaluator. I'm your host this evening, Ann Dolin, and for the last 24 years, since 1998, my tutors, executive function coaches, and college admissions consultants and I have been helping students to improve their grades, their confidence in school, and to help them to get into the schools of their choice when it comes to college. So before we get started and I introduce our guest, I'd love to know the ages of your kids. So you're going to see a poll pop up in just a second. And if you could put into that poll the year your child or your children will graduate, that would be great. So go to the poll and pop in the years of your kids. And let's see what we have. Looks like there's a duel between juniors and sophomores. Melissa, thanks for putting this poll together for us. Let us know when we're all set. Okay, awesome. So it looks like we do have mostly parents of juniors here at 49%, followed by sophomores at 33%. We have one senior and a bunch of freshmen, and actually some 7th and 8th graders and younger students. And even for parents that have kids younger than their junior year, it's not too early to be prepared. So I'm so glad that you're here this evening. Well, let me introduce my guest. Please meet Kristin Landis. And Kristin, I'm so excited to have you. She has lots of experience in college admissions. For the last 11 years, she's worked at University of Virginia as an admissions evaluator, meaning that she evaluated over 10,000 applications, both from in-state students, out-of-state students, and international candidates. In addition, she is now a college consultant with us here at Educational Connections. Kristin has her bachelor of science from University of Richmond and a law degree from Emory University. So, Kristin, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Oh, Anne, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. So let's start out by talking about the changes in the world of college admissions. Tell me a little bit about what's happened since COVID.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest things that you're seeing is an increase in applications. In November of 2021, the Common App reported that while 13%, there was a 13% increase in applicants, there was actually a 22% increase in applications, which means more and more students are applying to a larger pool of schools. So you're seeing more and more applications that college admissions offices have to review. And the reason for this is twofold. One is the test optional. With the pandemic, almost all universities went to a test optional component, and many of those universities have continued to keep that. And I think some universities are deciding that they may keep it forever, but right now it's still in place with most universities. So students feel that they have the opportunity to kind of cast a wider net, that they can apply to more schools and more schools that maybe they wouldn't have applied to before because their test scores may have prohibited them, or they thought they would have prohibited them from getting into the school. So they're having more reach schools. And I think another reason for this that we've seen because of the pandemic is because everything went remote. Colleges and universities had to become very well versed in their online presence. So people could take virtual tours. There was a lot more materials to find online about the universities. So I think that allowed students to have more information, and so they applied to more schools. So the result of all that is that you're seeing that admissions rates are decreasing, especially at highly selective and competitive schools, just because there are more applicants out there.
That makes sense, Kristin. Thanks for sharing that. And we've seen that with the students that we work with too, that many of them want to cast a wider net and apply to, when they come into us, they often have these unbalanced lists with lots of very reach schools and not enough kind of safety or target schools.
Sure.
So when it comes to evaluating students in your work at UVA, what did you look for, and what do colleges in general look for in an application?
Sure. I think that the most obvious thing that people are going to think of, and really is so important, is first of all, the program, the types of classes that students take, the rigor of those classes, And then of course, obviously the grades, how you perform in those classes. That's always going to be paramount for most schools. But what we're seeing and what I've seen in my own evaluation of applicants is that human component, I like to call it the human insight part of the application, is becoming more and more important. And what I mean by that is, what do you bring to the table that kind of sets you apart from the person sitting next to you or the applicant I read before? And when I opened applications and when I read students, what I would look at and I would see, would this student be a good fit at the University of Virginia or whatever university that is? And would we as a university be able to provide that student with a nice environment or good atmosphere for personal and also professional growth? So those were the questions that I would ask myself when I reviewed an applicant. And then the way to answer that question is the student has to provide a narrative of some sort. And that narrative follows through with both their program and also what they do outside of the classroom. And so looking at that narrative is really, really important.
Can you give an example of a narrative?
Sure. So I had a student one time who was interested in history, but they were also interested in computers, and they also loved to travel. So seeing that what they're passionate about and what really makes them tick is what I want to see in application. So with that student, we looked at summer opportunities, pre-law classes, things that they could do online. And they took one or two of those types of opportunities. Another thing they did was they really loved to read. So they went and they volunteered at their local library. And then with regards to the computers, they took kind of a computer enrichment class. And all those things, along with type that went in line with their coursework, was the narrative that they explained through their essays. And I saw like what made them tick, what they were passionate about, and what they would bring to the university.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that later, because I know we're going to talk
Sure.
about branding and really how to help kids
Yep.
stand out in the work that you do now with students.
Yep.
But what do you do if a child doesn't really know what they want to do? They don't know what they want to major in. They don't really feel like they stand out in any particular way. How do you help them kind of hone their narrative?
Yeah, and that's totally understandable. And I know that parents can get really anxious about that their child maybe, they don't know what they're passionate about. And you know what? At 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, sometimes you don't know that. And that's totally and absolutely fine. So what I do is I meet with the child and I talk about, hey, what do you like to do in your free time? What do you do outside of the classroom? Or what really interests you? And then we kind of delve into that more. And from that, we kind of glean out certain aspects and compose a narrative in that way. And I mean, every child is interested in something. They may not be, in a million different activities, and that's fine, because I'd rather see a child passionate about 1, 2, or 3 things than have a whole plethora of activities.
Yeah, and it's great to always have somebody else tease that out, because I can
Yeah.
imagine as a parent, it's probably hard for you to say, you need to do this, Johnny, or actually you're kind of good at
Absolutely.
that. Have you found that with the students that you work with, that they're much more willing to work with you and listen to you than maybe a parent?
Oh, absolutely. No question. I think both you and I as parents know that from our own experiences. When you have that third party kind of takes the onus off the parent, and that person who is well versed in working with other students and asking the right questions can make the student feel comfortable. It really is important and can make this experience that is very nerve-wracking to a lot of people and very challenging, make it a little bit more manageable.
So let's shift gears a bit, Kristin, and talk about standardized test scores and the role of the SAT and ACT. Where are we at now with this test optional movement?
Yes. I mean, as I said before, a lot of schools still are test optional, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't pursue testing, because it can also help your application. So my recommendation is have your child take both the ACT and the SAT. There are lots of practice tests out there. I know that we have them for people to take advantage of. See how they do, which one they feel more comfortable with, which one that they like better, because they're both very different. And then hone in on which one of those that they want to take a test prep class, and then take the test maybe 1 or 2 or 3 times, see how they do. And then the other component is, once they decide what schools that they're interested in applying to, look at those schools, see where the higher end of the students who are accepted, what their scores are. And then if your score falls into that category, then I would submit the score. If it doesn't fall into that category, I wouldn't submit the score, because once you submit a score, I, as an evaluator, would have to take that into account. If you don't submit a score, no penalty, no foul.
So I guess, Kristin, from what you've shared, that sometimes students will have a score. So say they have a 28 on the ACT, and that may not be really great for a school like UVA, but it actually might be awesome for another school on their list. Is that something you help kids parse through, as when to submit the score and when not to?
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to really do the homework, do the legwork, really look at the schools that you end up applying to, and looking at the different components and deciding when to submit things, when not to. It's very, very important that you look at those things.
Yeah, and I know that you're always great at helping guide kids, and we do that all the time in the office when parents call us about testing. So if you feel like you want your child to take a test and see how they do, and as Kristin mentioned, ideally take a practice SAT and a practice ACT, or if your child's really pushing back, we can use a PSAT score and then take an ACT and see how you fare. We have practice tests coming up, and these are super easy for kids to take. They're virtual, but with a live proctor. So they roll out of bed on Saturday morning at 9 o'clock, and they can take an SAT or an ACT. So if this is of interest to you, grab your phone, open your camera, hold your phone up to the QR code, and it will take you directly to the page on our website where you can register for a practice SAT or ACT. So these are our summer dates from June 4th through August 27th. Either one of these tests can be taken. So we know that testing, even though in a test optional environment, it can still really help a candidate. But what about AP test scores, Kristin? Often people are confused. Should I submit my test score? Should I not? Do colleges even care about these? What did you find in evaluating lots of kids while at UVA?
Yeah, this is the AP test scores fall exactly like the ACT and the SAT, in that I would definitely study for them, take them, and then depending on how you do and the schools that you're applying to, because that information is out there as well, you decide whether you're going to submit the score or not. A lot of people don't realize that you don't have to submit all of your AP scores. If you have a 5 on an AP bio exam and you have a 2 on an AP Spanish exam, you could submit the bio exam and not submit the Spanish exam. And depending on the school, like you said before, if for a UVA, a 4 or a 5 is something I would want to submit. A 3, maybe not. So it just really need to know with your counselor, looking at the schools you're applying to and what types of scores people get and whether it's attractive to submit that score or not.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristin. And by the way, in addition to Kristin on our team, we also have Erin Ebert, and Erin is our college counseling program director. And she's the one that will talk to parents about their needs for their students. So if something that Kristin shared rings a bell, if you'd like to work with Kristin or our other college counselor, Lisa, or just want to talk about your child to see what to do next, Erin can help you. Absolutely no cost. It's a 20-minute consultation. And again, you can see her calendar by grabbing your phone, holding it up to the QR code, and then you can find a time on her calendar to talk to her. But that's Erin Ebert, and I'm so excited that Erin Ebert has been with the company for 12 years this summer, and we're a great team. So thank you for your commitment, Erin, and for helping so many families. All right, so Kristin, let's shift gears from things that are hard data, like standardized test scores and grades, and talk about something that's a little bit more subjective, essays. How important are essays these days?
They're extremely important. As I mentioned earlier, that human component, that human insight component, to which essays are a big part of, are really playing a huge factor now in college admissions. I mean, that is the opportunity to really connect the dots, show the student, to show who they are, what they're passionate about, what makes them tick, how they communicate. And that's college admissions are really looking to see, that's the opportunity to really learn about the student. So essays are very, very important. I think one of the things you're also seeing now that we didn't see as much in the past is in supplemental essays. A lot of colleges are now asking, why XYZ college? Why our college? They want to know from students, why do you want to come here? How do you see yourself presenting yourself in our environment? And can you contribute to our community in and out of the classroom? And will we be a good fit for you? So you're seeing that a tremendous amount now. And then one other thing I want to mention that a lot of people don't put a lot of credence on or pay important attention to is that additional information section that you see on the Common App. That is a wonderful opportunity to explain any extenuating circumstances that the student may have, if they have a learning disability, if they've had like a downturn in their grades that they need to explain. That is a wonderful opportunity to take advantage of explaining that to the admissions evaluator.
Thanks, Kristin. That's a great point. And when it comes to essays, as you mentioned, supplemental essays, and working with parents for a long time, it seems like parents sometimes think that and kids too, that there's one essay, the Common App essay, and that just goes to everybody, which it does if they're on the Common App. But these little supplemental essays take up a long time. It's a lot of work. How do you help kids parse out their summer to make sure if, say, they're applying to 9 schools and they may have more than 20 essays to write, how do you help them break up their time over the summer to make sure that they get it done?
That's a very good question. I mean, time management is really important. And that's where having a counselor can help with the student plan that time accordingly. Even though they may have 20 supplemental essays to write, there are usually common themes amongst schools and their supplemental essays, so that you can take a supplemental essay and help recraft it to answer another school without actually having to go all the way back to the drawing board again. And so that's something that I help students do. So it's not as daunting as, oh, I really am writing 20 different essays. You may actually be maybe doing 2 or 3 or 4 different themes and then crafting it to answer the question directly of that specific school's supplemental essay.
That's great information. Thanks, Kristin. What about when kids are not in class? We know that it's important that they get good grades and test scores, their essays are good, but what about extracurriculars? Do colleges really care what kids do when they're not in school?
They absolutely do. And that kind of goes along to the things that we've been talking about all evening is what is, college admissions, you can see the numbers, you see the courses, you see the grades, but really what they do outside of the classroom is so important. What are they passionate about? What makes them tick? What contribution will they bring to our university? That's really important. And not everyone has to be president of the class either. There are all different types of involvement. It's really just trying to find what the child is passionate about, what interests them. That's really important. And that is done mainly outside of the classroom.
Erin was telling me, and Lisa, our other college counselor, about a student they're working with who didn't really think he had anything too special going for him. But it turns out that he's an excellent fly fisherman and he has a little side business going, and that's becoming his narrative. Absolutely. And so it could be something that you think, oh, this is really cool and I like doing this, but you don't think of it as something that's unique to you and that you can craft an essay around it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that kind of leads us to, when kids are thinking about how to frame their passion is really about a major. How important is it for kids to select an intended major?
So that I know that parents, and very rightly so, may get really stressed out about this, and students, because again, a young teenager may not know what they want to do, and that's fine. I mean, there are people in their 50s who don't know what they want to do yet. So that's totally and absolutely understandable. So finding an intended major, quite frankly, it really is only, I think, important when you're applying to specific schools. And again, that goes back to researching the schools that you're applying to. Some universities have specific colleges that you have to apply to when you apply as a first year. at University of Virginia, for example, if you want to go into kinesiology, or if you want to go into engineering, or you want to go into nursing or architecture, those are specific schools that you have to apply to versus the general College of Arts and Sciences. So in those instances, and other schools have other specific colleges that you would need to apply to right from the get-go, then those you would need to know kind of your area of interest. Otherwise, if you're just, want to major in biology, or you're interested in English or history, just general liberal arts, when you put that intended major on your Common App, not really that important. At least when I was evaluating applications, that didn't really factor too much in, because more times than not, you're probably going to change that major once you get to school anyways.
That's a good point, Kristin. Tell us a little bit about demonstrated interest and why demonstrated interest is more important now after COVID than ever before.
It is. I mean, demonstrated interest has always been important, but as you said, more important now than ever. And I think there are more ways now to explore and show that demonstrated interest. Not only is the college visit the obvious one, but also signing up for their email exchange distribution list. Any other types of, if there's an alumni interview that you can sign up for. But one thing that I think people don't realize, and now that the pandemic is over and that college admissions officers are going and visiting high schools, it is so important to go to that informational session if you can, because more likely than not, that person who's giving that talk is the person who will be evaluating that application from that applicant from that high school. So my recommendation is go up to that person, that officer at the end of the information session, introduce yourself, ask a question, get a card from them, and then follow up with an email, a thank you email. Those things go into your file. And when an admissions officer is looking at hundreds of applicants, if they can put a name with a face, that's invaluable. So I really recommend that people do that if they can.
That reminds me of my youngest son. The counselor from JMU, where he wanted to go, came to his school, and I said, you have to write a thank you note, which he did. And he was waitlisted, and he wrote him another note. And so then they had this communication going. Mm-hmm. And he said, Ethan, I wanted to let you know you're going to get an email tomorrow from the school that you're off the wait list. You're accepted.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And it was great because, I think you're right that personal connection can go far, just like in life, it's not just during college admissions. So let's talk a little bit about early decision and how that differs from early action and regular decision. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. And it's confusing. So early decision is a binding contract. So that's usually the first application date. And if a student knows that is their dream school, that is where they want to go, I don't want to go anywhere else but there, I recommend applying early decision. So it's a contract that both the student, the guidance counselor, and the parent all sign. So if the student is accepted, they have to go to the school. Early action is not binding. And it's usually, sometimes it's the same date as an application deadline as early decision. Sometimes it's about a month later. And in that, you just find out earlier, but you don't have to commit to the school. So that's the difference between early decision and early action. A lot of people are scared of early decision, and I understand that. But I'm a huge proponent of early decision. If a student does their homework, starts early, and looks at schools and finds a school that they think that they're interested in, absolutely apply early decision. And I can just give you some numbers that show why that is it really gives you a leg up. Schools, and this is where you do your research, there are a number of schools that will fill almost half their class with early decision. Middlebury, 45% of their class they fill with early decision. Northwestern, 50%. Duke, 51%. Dartmouth, 47%. So what does that mean? That means that your acceptance rate chance is that much higher. At a school like Brown, they have a normal 21% acceptance rate. They have normally a 5% acceptance rate. If you apply early decision, it's a 21% acceptance rate. Duke has a 6% normal regular decision early acceptance rate, has a 21% early decision acceptance rate. And I could go on and on. Vanderbilt, 7% regular, 20% for early decision. So truly the numbers just show it, but you really need to do your research on schools, because take a school like UVA. UVA has only, this is the second year that they've reintroduced early decision into their offerings for admittance. And the regular decision acceptance rate was 24.6%. And the early decision was 27.8%. So not a huge difference. So it's really important to look at the specific schools and see if early decision can really play that much of a factor.
So once kids get their decisions, what should they do if they're deferred or waitlisted?
First of all, I wouldn't get discouraged. I mean, your son is a perfect example of that. There's always still a chance. And so what I suggest doing is follow up with an email, because anything you write to a university goes into your file. Follow up with an email expressing your sincere interest in attending the school. If it's your first choice, I would tell them it's your first choice, and that if you're accepted, come off the wait list, or if you come off being deferred, that you'll definitely attend, reiterate that interest. I would also, if there's anything new to your application that wasn't, that's happened to you, like you won an award or you got a leadership position, or let's say you went on a fabulous trip, anything that would just kind of add something to color to your application, I would send in that email as well. Go revisit the school. There's nothing wrong with doing that, and see if you can actually make an appointment with an admissions officer. All those types of things you can do to try to increase your chances for getting off the wait list or getting off your defer into an acceptance.
I'm sure, as you know, when you were at UVA before you came on board with us, you probably felt, it was probably heavy to you making decisions for kids. Should I accept the student, waitlist them, deny them? How did you make those decisions and be okay with it? Yeah. I remember you telling the story about somebody that came to you and helped you overcome that fear.
Absolutely. So my first year back in 2010, when I started working at UVA, when you see that admit, waitlist, deny button, and you see this kid and they're a really great student, it's really agonizing, and you agonize over decision. And I remember the associate dean of admissions at the time said to me, Kristin, there is a school for everyone. There really is. UVA may not be the school for them, but there is a perfect school out there for them. And that really just gave me a different perspective. And as a parent who's been through the college admissions process 3 times, also working in an admissions office for 11 years, and also working as a private consultant, I see the perspective from each sides of the table. And if anything I can impart on everyone who's listening tonight is that there is a school for everyone. Try not to put so much pressure on yourself and on your student, on your child. And really, college is what you make of it. It's once a student gets to a school, that experience is really what they make of it. And it doesn't define them in how they're going to be in life. And if that can kind of manage people's expectations, that's really, how we can help them as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Kristin. I agree. There is a college for everyone. So if your head is spinning, it's okay. We've got you covered. I wanted to let you know that we have programs that can help kids that are either going in to 9th and 10th grade this fall, or they're going into 11th or 12th. So these are rising juniors and seniors. And then we have a specific program just for kids that are going into their senior year. And that's called the Summer Express, where we work with them. Kristin, Lisa, and our other college counselor, Avery, will work with students, rising seniors, throughout the summer to make sure that they have most of their work done by the end of the summer. And here's a QR code. If this is of interest to you, you can scan this with your phone. So here's how we help kids. For rising 9th through 11th graders, we help them with summer planning, determining what they're going to do this summer if they don't already have a plan. We help them with preliminary list development, making sure that they have schools that are not too heavy in the reach category, which is usually what happens when we first see kids. Their list is unbalanced, so they have reach schools, they have some target, and they have some framework or safety schools. We'll make sure that they've picked the correct classes for the fall. And even though they already chose those classes in the spring, it's not too late to change them. And sometimes that happens. We'll help them with their college resume, their high school resume, to make them really stand out and shine. And then we'll work with them on their career exploration, which really means what is their passion? What might be their intended major? What are their unique skills or ability based on their personality? And either it's through an informal conversation, as Kristin mentioned, or we also have a formal evaluation that we do with students that helps tease out their natural abilities and gifts. And kids love that because they often see this list that's objective of what they're really great at. And that makes them feel good and helps them to hone their skills. And so then for our other students, our older students, we finalize their summer planning. We refine their college list to make sure it's balanced. We help them with their testing plans. We will help them schedule and plan their college visits. We help them prep for interviews if they have interviews lined up. And then we work with them on their essays, their ideas, make sure their essays are technically correct. And then lastly, we make sure that their applications are done just to the T. And for most of our students that they can press send before the early action deadline, which is November 1st. So if we can be of help to you, let us know. Here's Erin's contact information. You can either get on her calendar by scanning this QR code, or you can go to our website, which is ectutoring.com. And at the top is a link for summer, or is a link for college consulting. And then you'll also see her contact information there. So thank you so much for joining us, Kristin. It's always a pleasure. Thank you for being with me this evening. And I want to let everybody know that we have 2 more webinars coming up in our college series. And by the way, we'll go to Q&A in just a second. So if you have a question, pop it in the chat. Our next one is June 15th, also with Kristin, and it's the secrets to making your college application stand out. So today she spoke in generalities about creating a narrative or a brand, and she'll be more specific next time we talk. We'll focus really on how to help differentiate your child in a mass of lots of different applications. And then we have an expert coming in talking about how to help kids prepare for college. And she's the author of the book, How to College, Building Critical Adulting Schools in High School. So this doesn't have to do with college applications, but it's more of the soft skills that kids need to hone in high school to be really ready for college. And you can find that information on our website, which is ectutoring.com/webinar.series. All right, so we're going to go to the Q&A in just a second. And I wanted to let you know that after the Q&A, a survey will pop up on your screen. And if you would be so kind as to take that survey, it would be super helpful so that we know what was helpful to you in this webinar. All right, so let's go to the chat and see what we have. And Kristin, I'm going to read some of these questions out. Oh, and a common question that parents ask is has this been recorded? And the answer is yes. Tomorrow, we're going to send out the recording of this presentation, along with some other things that we talked about, like the practice test schedule, so that you can sign your child up if that would be helpful to you. All right, so question from Regina. By not submitting AP scores, does that indicate that they did poorly? Kristin, thoughts on that?
No, absolutely not. I think that the game has changed with the pandemic, and scores are important, but not with the same emphasis that they used to be. Whenever I see an AP student, it's really the grade that they got in the class that is much, much more important than the score that they got on the AP exam.
Thank you for that. Another question about athletes. So any advice for athletes that are hoping to be recruited? And I think you were a recruited athlete as well, Kristin.
I was a competitive swimmer. I was on scholarship at University of Virginia, but that was back in the dark ages. But now, but absolutely, if your student is an athlete, I suggest, and if they want to participate at the university level, whether it be D1, D2, or D3, I would reach out to coaches directly. They have their emails and they're up on the school's websites, and I would send them an email, schedule a time to meet with them virtually. If you're going to the school, it's great to meet them in person. Anything that can help you differentiate yourself is wonderful. And if you do really want to participate at that university in the sport, absolutely contact the coach.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristin.
Mhm.
Debbie asks or says, I've heard that showing too much demonstrated interest can backfire for financial aid. Same with early decision. If you really want them, they know they can give you less money and you're still likely to go. Their goal is to get you for the lowest cost. Is that true?
I've never heard that before. I've never heard that.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Thanks, Debbie, for
Mhm.
that question. Bob, on early decision, if the school meets demonstrated need, are you obligated to take the offer? Or can you decline it if they basically don't get the grants and the loans that they need?
Yes,
If they don't
you
get
can.
the financial aid package.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Yes, absolutely. You can decline for financial reasons if you don't get the aid that you need.
That's pretty much the only reason. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Let's see. Thank you, Bob, for that question. Gretchen, if a student has a big drop in grades during COVID/remote learning, is it okay to explain that on the application? Does it look bad to blame it on remote learning?
Not only is it okay, I would definitely do it. I can't even tell you how many applicants I've read in the last 2 years that actually do that. Remote learning was incredibly challenging, and the admissions offices know that. And if it did have a really detrimental on your student, mental health, their grades, any of those types of things, I would absolutely discuss it.
Thanks for that, Kristin.
Mhm.
Another parent asked, when is a good time to start with a counselor? And I can, share a little bit with you. If you have a rising senior now, because that they got a lot of work ahead of them, and Kristin's ready to help them starting now throughout the summer. If you have a younger student, we've just enrolled a number of younger students in 8th and 9th graders who they're not ready to really act on much in terms of testing. However, we do help them. We do an interest inventory with them. We help them understand their strengths. We help them with course selections and talk them through the process. So it's just a few hours here and there, but it's really helpful for kids and parents of younger students to know what to expect. But most of our students right now, they're either younger students that, just have a few hours and want to get ahead of the game. And then we also have rising juniors and seniors who have hit the ground running, and the seniors are working on their applications and the juniors are doing precursors to applications. All right. So what if your child is very shy? Is it better not to meet in person? So I think that she means an interview.
Well,
Kristin, thoughts on that?
Sure. Most schools don't offer interviews. A big school like University of Virginia that gets 50,000 applications, they don't do interviews. Some schools have alumni interviews where an alumni in your community will meet with the student, and then they submit kind of a little blurb to the university about their interaction with the student, and that goes into the student's file, and the admissions evaluator reviews that. But I don't want people to be discouraged if their child is shy, because not everyone can. A school does not want to fill the whole class with a bunch of extroverts who are all massive leaders. People can be silent leaders. They can make contributions in many, many different ways. And it's just bringing that out in the narrative through your essays that you can explain that. So I would not be discouraged at all if your child is shy.
Thank you for sharing that, especially for all the parents of shy kids. I'm one of them. All right, so Nina asks, so is the well-rounded application no longer the thing to do? Is it better to brand with a specific theme?
So this is a really good question, and it's really a delicate balance, because on the one hand, you don't want to be a jack of all trades and have a laundry list of things, but you also don't want to be incredibly myopic in a certain area, so that, you know, your program may be lopsided where you just have all STEM classes and you're only interested in tech and that sort of thing. I mean, obviously you want to be as authentic as possible, the student in their application, because that really shows through to the evaluator, but it really is kind of a delicate balance between showing some interest but significant interest in an area. And your college admissions, your college counselor can help you with that, kind of make that delicate balance.
Thanks, Kristin.
Mm-hmm.
If your child has a 504 plan for ADHD, should that be mentioned on the application?
I would. I did it with my son and my daughter both. I think it's important. It's also a part of who they are. It's an important part of who they are, and they should be not ashamed of that, and they should talk about it.
KP asks about practice SATs, and I think you mean mock tests. So KP, I will have, if you send Erin an email, ERIN at ectutoring.com, she'll let you know how we handle kids that need extended time on the mock test. Thank you for that question. Kathleen says, if the counseling program, if the counseling program is 24 hours, how is that best allocated or spent working with a rising junior? So with a rising junior, that program is going to last for a while. It will take them through their application. So it's not just short term, it will take them through the whole application cycle. Thank you, Kathleen. Let's see. Is it better? Okay. Oh, should you talk about mental health issues on your application? Would that put you at a disadvantage? Kristin, thoughts on that?
Absolutely not. I mean, as I mentioned before, the student needs to be as authentic as possible about themselves. College admissions reviewers they're human beings too. People have mental health issues. People have incredible tragedies in their lives. I have sat many a night crying my eyes out reading an application about what a child has gone through. So really, it's just speaking from their heart, trying to show the admissions reader who they are, what's important to them, what has made them who they are. And so absolutely do not feel inhibited if that's something that's significant in your child's life, that they explain it.
Thank you. Lindy asks, is it better to make a B on an AP course or an A in an honors course? I think I know what you're going to say.
I would say a B in an AP course. I think it's important. This is what I say to people is take the hardest class you can that you can get the best grade in to an extent. So an AP class, especially at highly selective universities, carries a lot of weight. So a B is still a good score, is still a good grade. If you're going to get a C, if you think your child will get a C, then I wouldn't take it, but a B would be fine.
Eve says, any tips for a student who has focused on one thing as a freshman and sophomore and then changed their mind abruptly the junior year? So went from music to now engineering, and he's a rising senior. What should she do about that?
I can tell you that when I've seen an engineering student who's involved in music, I absolutely light up, because that is two very different areas. And that in an engineering class, that musician who will bring that to the table and vice versa, it makes for a really interesting student. So I love it. It's fantastic, and talk about it.
Well, I think you just made Eve's night. All right. So Hiba asks, do the junior year grades and the SAT both strengthen the student status? Does one weigh more than the other?
Grades are always going to trump everything. So grades first and foremost to me. And then the SAT score, it really is depending on the schools that they're applying to.
Somebody asked, if the AP score is a 5 but the student did not get an A in the class because of a really difficult teacher, how do colleges view that?
I would definitely submit the score. College admissions evaluators know that there are hard teachers out there. And in fact, this is some of the stuff we're going to talk at the next webinar, so I don't want to give all my secrets away tonight. But usually if you have a number of students applying from one school and they're all taking kind of the same class, you see a trend with some grades and you may know that that's a really difficult class. But I would definitely submit that 5 because that shows that the student knew the material.
Awesome, thank you. Do you think Grace asked if a student with a GPA at around 3.7 and she thinks that's low, I don't think that's low, can still have chances in getting accepted to harder colleges like UVA?
So first I would ask if that's a weighted or an unweighted GPA, because colleges are more interested in a weighted GPA than an unweighted GPA. I know that there are certain high schools that only report unweighted GPAs. So that's kind of a factor in there, but students are evaluated in groups in their high school. So that student is going to be compared against other applicants from their high school. So I can't give a definitive answer on that, but that's kind of how students are evaluated. So I can't tell you whether a 3.7 is a good GPA or not, because I don't know what the other GPAs are, and that's from that class.
Elmer says, thanks for this webinar. I was wondering, my kid attends Washington International, which he doesn't say this, but I do know Washington International is an IB school. So in general, do you think applicants from international schools are at a disadvantage because they follow a different curricula?
Absolutely not. In fact, almost all admissions officers and evaluators are very well versed in IB. IB is considered one of the most rigorous programs. My daughter's roommate actually goes to the international school in DC, so I know the school very, very well. So I would be loud and proud that he or she is in an IB program. That's fantastic.
What are the chances of getting into a school if you applied early decision and didn't get in?
So this is another thing where you really need to research the school, because sometimes early decision, it's one and done. If you're not accepted, you're done. Sometimes if you're not accepted, you're deferred and put into the regular pool. So it's really going to depend on the school.
Naz asks, what's the difference between the SAT and ACT? And I can answer that and share that. The ACT is a really fast-paced test, and the difficulty in the test is that you have to pace yourself. It goes at a very fast clip. So kids that can read quickly and answer questions quickly tend to like that test better. The questions are easier. They're more like school. Whereas the SAT, there are fewer questions, and you can go at a slower pace. The questions are harder. So sometimes when you're reading a reading comprehension question, you have to think, what are they asking me? I'm not quite sure here. It's a little bit more complicated. So for different kids, different tests. And what we found in working with lots of kids over the years, that when kids take a practice SAT and a practice ACT, about 1/3 of kids have a clear indication. It's clear, like your score is much better on the ACT, you should go for that test, or you're a much better test taker on the SAT. But for about 2/3 of kids, it's really a toss-up. They kind of do about the same. So then it comes down to personal preference. Which test did you feel most comfortable with? And then we encourage them just to practice for that test. And because every college takes both tests, you do not need to take both tests. You can just go for one. It doesn't matter. Colleges don't have a preference. So don't split your time and focus and your efforts and your money if you're going to hire a tutor or take a class. Go with one test. It's easier to do better if you just practice for one test. You mentioned, oh, okay. So how would admissions officers evaluate applications that do not submit test scores versus applications that do have a test score?
So if you submit the test, you're not penalized for not submitting a test score ever. But if you submit the test score and the test score is not a good one, now you're going to be penalized to some degree. So you need to research the school very, very well and see what are considered the upper range of the test scores to decide whether you're going to submit the score or not.
How can a really good test score help you?
I think a really good test score, just like having a really good grade in a class, it's another plus for you.
Awesome, thank you. I'm going around I'm going around in circles. Which is better, if applying to a specific major in a tough college to get into, example, engineering? Or should my child apply as general admission? And then, okay, so she's asking, do you apply to a school like like engineering, where the chances of getting in are really slim, or do you apply to like real estate and then switch your major once you're there?
I hate to sound almost like a broken record here, but it's really going to depend on the school. There are schools where you apply to a specific school, like the engineering school, and then because you think, or let's say you apply to the arts and science school, but you really want to be in the engineering school, but it's impossible to transfer into the engineering school. But there are other schools where you can make the change between the different discipline schools. So again, you really, with the help of your counselor, need to review the different schools and what their policies are with regards to that.
Thanks. All right, so applying to art schools, can you talk about this? Kristin, do you know about applying to art schools?
So with art schools, just like even just applying to regular liberal arts schools, you're gonna have to submit an art portfolio. You can submit an art portfolio also to regular schools, but for an art school specifically, and I'm sure if this person's child is thinking of art schools, they probably already are working on some sort of portfolio, but that is going to play a really significant part of the application process, that portfolio, and it will be reviewed by the department and will be given some sort of numerical score, and then that goes to part of the admissions process.
Carol says, at a recent Nova College fair, reps from quite a few schools suggested my non-STEM student should plan to take math through calculus. How important is this class? And what would you recommend to a student who's not likely to get through this level of math?
So if they're a non-STEM student, I definitely would recommend taking 4 years of a math. If you don't make it to calculus, you don't make it to calculus. That's one of the reasons it's sometimes good to start with a counselor earlier on, because especially in math and in foreign language, these paths are set very, very early. Like you have to take algebra 1 in 8th grade in order to get through BC calculus in 12th grade. So getting that advice early on can help you in that trajectory. But a non-STEM student, I would just make sure they take 4 years of a math. And if they don't get to calculus, they don't get to calculus. But, hopefully in the other areas, in history or in English, they'll be in AP level classes, and that would balance it out.
And next question is, can you explain weighted and non-weighted grades?
Right. So an unweighted GPA is literally just the raw, like an A is a 4.0, a B is a 3.0. Weighted takes into account the level of rigor of the class. So an AP class will have a weight of 5.0. A honors class will have a weight of 4.0. Now it'll change, by high school. So don't hold me to these exact figures. And so that factors into the weighted GPA. So let's say someone has all A's, their unweighted GPA will be a 4.0, but if they take 7 AP classes and they have all A's, then their weighted GPA may be like a 4.6 or 4.7. So that's the difference between weighted and unweighted.
I have two parents that have kind of asked the same question. One is asking, are applicants from a private school at a disadvantage because they're competing against so many other high achieving students? And then Grace asked, my daughter goes to a small private school, 16 to 20 students in her class. Does this give her a disadvantage in the college application process?
I would say that you're definitely compared to the students who are in your student's class. That's no question. Whether it's an advantage or a disadvantage, depending. I mean, obviously some of the stuff comes down to raw numbers, what the GPA is, what your testing is. But there is that human component, that human insight factor that I talked about. So sometimes a student with a 4.6 from the same high school as someone with a 4.3, maybe that 4.3 student is going to get in because of other things. Maybe they, are an amazing tuba player, or their essay was that much more compelling. So it's not a hard and fast rule, but you are I mean, yes, in college admissions, you are compared against the students in that high school. And if you go to a small one, 16 to 20, that's okay too, versus if you're going to one that has 1,000 kids also. I think it's really important for parents and students to look at the secondary school report from their school, from their high school. Every single school has one, and just kind of familiarize themselves with the course offerings that are offered there and the profile, because that profile is going to the colleges. And every time I opened an application, I look at the secondary school report first to see what the school offers, what kind of things they have outside of the classroom, that type of thing, the demographics. And then that gives me context when I'm reading the applications.
The school profile is really important
It is,
in
it's really
college,
important.
super important in college admissions. Can you talk a little bit about how in private consulting, working with students, you use that school profile to help really leverage the child's application?
Well, I think the most important thing is in course offerings, making sure that the student is taking really the most rigorous classes that they can, that they'll do well in. I think that's really important. I think if a student is coming from an unrepresented area, or they have over 40% free and reduced lunch, I think that's something that's really important, that to talk with them. And that's something that you highlight also in the application. So I think walking through the secondary school report with the student and with the parent is important in determining how you're going to craft your narratives and such.
Great. Thank you for that. And let's see, should you wait to take a practice test until you've had a semester of Algebra 2? And the answer is usually kids take practice tests in the spring of their sophomore year, in the summer before their junior year, or in the fall of their junior year. And if they've done no testing at this point and they're a rising senior, they can still take one now. But statistically speaking, kids get their best score in the spring of their junior year. Even though there's a push, especially in Northern Virginia, for kids to take the test really early, really their best score. They can take it early, but they should still take it again in the spring. So we can help them figure out a best testing plan based on the math that they're taking, their extracurricular sports when they have time to prepare, and also based on their course selection over the years, when is going to be their best time to take tests, the SAT or the ACT. Okay, we just have another minute. We have so many questions left, Kristin. Oh gosh, let's see. Oh, okay. All right, so can you apply to 2 different schools within a college and see where you get in?
No. Mostly
okay,
no.
that's easy. Okay, well then let me ask you one more. Are courses like health and PE and music counted in the GPA?
No.
Okay, got it. And Darlene asked, I feel like early decision is so much pressure on kids who mostly do not know which one college is right for them in November. Why are colleges moving towards this now, especially when the cultural discourse is about how to reduce the pressure on our kids?
I 100% agree with you. There's something called a yield rate that colleges publish, which shows the number of people who are accepted and then go to the school. It's a very attractive thing. Colleges want their yield rate to be quite high, and early decision gives you a high yield rate.
Awesome, thank you. And then last, somebody asked what is covered in the 20-minute consultation, and we want to hear about your child and what's going on with your child, where they are in the admissions process, how you're thinking about things, and we can make recommendations to you in terms of how we can be most helpful. But really, it's the call is us listening to where you are in the process and seeing if we can be of help or pointing you in the right direction to make sure that your child's on the path to getting their college applications complete and helping them stand out in a crowd. All right, so that's everything. Kristin, thank you so much. You've been fabulous. I so appreciate it. Thank you to so many parents who've been on. Clearly, this is an important topic because this is our biggest webinar attendance. So thank you everyone for coming out tonight. Again, we'll follow up with you tomorrow. We'll send you the recording and some other resources. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. And again, if we can be of help, please feel free to reach out at any time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, and don't forget the survey at the end. I forgot about that. Thank you. Bye, everybody.